for her briefing. I now give the floor to Ms. Joyce Msuya.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, thank you for this opportunity to brief the Council on the humanitarian situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Mr. President, the crisis in eastern DRC is at a dangerous point. The situation is deteriorating rapidly, and if hostilities spill into Goma, a densely populated urban center, the impact on civilians could be devastating. More than 21 million people already need aid across the country, one of the highest numbers worldwide. Approximately 1 million people had already sought refuge in neighboring countries. The escalation in the east threatens to make a critical humanitarian situation even worse. In North and South Kivu, hundreds of civilians have been killed and injured in the last few weeks. Hundreds of thousands have fled their homes or shelters, often multiple times, to escape gunfire and shelling, especially around Sake and Minova. Humanitarian access remains constrained due to insecurity. Hospitals, including Dosho and Kieshero in Goma, are overwhelmed. Medical facilities in Minova are also struggling to tend to the hundreds of people in need of treatment for gunshot and shrapnel wounds. Bombings in overcrowded displacement sites in and around Sake and Minova have resulted in casualties, including among children, and destroyed shelters, causing panic and further displacement. I'm particularly concerned about the impact on women and girls. We already know that gender-based violence increased by 300% in recent years, and that 2/3 of all cases had occurred in 3 eastern provinces of North Kivu, South Kivu, and Ituri. Mr. President, the Secretary General has emphasized the importance of upholding international humanitarian and human rights law and ensuring immediate and unimpeded humanitarian access to populations in need. I reiterate this call. We urge all parties to protect civilians and critical infrastructure they rely on, respect the civilian nature of displacement sites, and avoid using wide area explosives and heavy weapons in populated areas. This will be particularly important should the hostilities spread into Goma, given the risks of conflict in urban areas. All parties must take constant care to spare civilians and civilian objects throughout military operations. Mr. President, in these challenging circumstances, our humanitarian partners have bravely and tirelessly continued their efforts to enable life-saving operations by negotiating access, including by providing critical care through our partners, particularly NGOs that deliver medical and food assistance. Council members, to address this escalating humanitarian crisis before the situation worsens further, I have 3 asks to the Council. First, I urge this Council and all member states to leverage their influence to ensure that international humanitarian law is respected by all parties. Civilians must be protected. IDP sites and medical facilities must be protected. Rapid, unimpeded, and safe humanitarian access to those in need must be facilitated. Second, since we are at the start of the year and many funding sources remain unavailable or delayed for various reasons, adequate funding is essential to enable and sustain urgent humanitarian action. In light of the scale and severity of the current situation, we are allocating $17 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund for immediate life-saving interventions. However, let's be clear, additional resources are urgently needed. Third, I urge the Council and all member states to use their influence to end the hostilities. The scale of suffering in the DRC demands urgent attention. The plight of the country's women, men, and children cannot continue to go unnoticed. Thank you.
I thank Mrs. Msuya for her briefing. I now give the floor to those